Tack så mycket, Sören. Det är alltid bra att ha en dansk i Bryssel. Jag tänker så här, om man inte är framgångsrik på engelska, då kan man alltid ta det på danska och prata lite snabbt också. Och sen så de andra nickar och håller med och ser lite svettiga ut. Och så helt plötsligt så börjar det hända grejer. Jag hoppas verkligen att språket kan vara till fördel i det fallet. Jaha, we're gonna continue in English, yes. I think. Do you speak any other language that we can understand? Finnish, maybe?
Not really.
Not really.
Not really.
Well, come up on stage, Stef.
Yeah,
we don't know each other actually, but you work as a lobbyist in Brussels.
Yes, you could say so.
Yeah, he's a Sören, but from another. He's one of those people that we. Sorry, I'm going to take this in Swedish. Han är en av de här som vi har hittat de få gemensamma nämnarna med. Så kanske. Så att man tar det man får, men när några starka då ska man alltid sätta sig diktan mot dem och så tar man spjärn. Stef Cornelis, Transport and Environment. You're going to focus on fuel efficiency, biofuels, things that nobody else talks about, if I understand this correctly, and then electrification.
Yeah.
I have some friends that actually made their own truck, and it's totally free from
it's
regular. What do you call that? Yeah, like fuel. It's a battery.
It's a battery.
Yeah,
a zero emission truck.
And they don't have any drivers in it.
Oh, really?
And they're going to start a project in Sweden, so
exciting.
it's going to be really exciting.
Cool.
But Vector is what's up with that? CO2 and the electrification, of course. But
exactly.
Is this your first time in Sweden, or have you been here before?
I was here. I was visiting Volvo actually 2 weeks ago in Gothenburg.
Don't tell them we have Scania here.
No, but I'm going to visit Scania too next year. So
he visited a big Swedish company with wheels. Yeah.
It's maybe the same as Søren says. We don't always agree with the manufacturers, but we speak with each other.
Where do you come from originally?
So I'm Belgian, so I'm not even Danish. So no Scandinavian skills, language
so the French
skills.
part or the
Flemish.
part?
So
Flemish.
I understand some words actually.
You do?
Yeah.
I don't understand him, but yeah, that's nice that you do.
We do.
Enchanté, welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much.
The stage is yours.
Thank you. So yeah, thank you very much for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to come and speak here. First of all, I think it was really great to hear how passionate Søren was speaking about what's happening in Brussels, and it's a faraway world, the Brussels bubble, and nobody knows what's actually happening there or understands it. But as Søren says, especially also with regards to climate, there's a lot on the agenda, also especially regarding trucks. And the more we talk with the transport sector, such as in LA, but also the French hauliers, we definitely see that we have some joint interests here, and we also see that also the transport sector is really willing to move. You know, there's this kind of stereotype about transport or trucks being polluters, or they're responsible for congestion, and I think it's also in everybody's interest that we get rid of these kind of stereotypes. So I work for TNE, Transport and Environment, on truck CO2 issues. Maybe a few words about our organization. So this is the TNE Powerhouse. So we are an organization based in Brussels. We are 30 people in Brussels, but we actually have more than 50 members all over Europe, also here in Sweden. So the members, they work on a more local level, on national topics, and we as TNE, we only focus on EU regulations. So that's also why I'm here today, to talk a bit more about what's happening in Brussels with regards to trucks and climate issues. So the goal of our federation is basically to campaign for more sustainable transport in Europe. I thought it would be good just start with a little bit of context. I'm not going to try to speak too long about this, but basically Europe has set itself pretty ambitious climate targets of reducing emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, with 40% by 2030. And to achieve this, you have two instruments in Europe. And the first one is the emission trading system, where you put the price on carbon and you can trade it. And that covers the sectors, the power sector, for example, in the industry. But the more relevant one for us and for our work, and also for you, is the non-ETS sector. And that covers three main sectors. These are road transport, CO2 emissions from housing, so heating, and agriculture. And here Europe has set itself a target that they need to reduce the emissions with 30% by 2030. And this is a legally binding target. So that means if Europe doesn't meet that target, they will get fined, basically. Now, to achieve this target, each member state gets a national target that's also legally binding. And the target for Sweden is 40% by 2030. So that means that Sweden needs to reduce emissions from these three sectors with 40% by 2030. And when you look at these three sectors, transport accounts for 50% of the CO2 emissions of road transport, housing, and agriculture. So basically that means Sweden needs to do a lot on, so I think we have a low battery here. So Sweden needs to do a lot on transport, because otherwise they will not meet the targets, and the same system. It's a legally binding target. They will get fined if they don't meet it. I mean, when you look at truck emissions in Sweden, they already account, trucks and buses, heavy trucks and buses, they account for more than 1/4 of the road CO2 emissions in Sweden. And when you look here, basically at this slide, you see the gray line, these are truck emissions, and you see that they're going up in Sweden, and they're going up even more rapidly than, for example, cars. So basically, I mean, in a nutshell, what I would want to say in this introduction is that you have ambitious climate targets on national level, so for Sweden, but also in Europe, and transport needs to do its share, basically, and also trucks. Well, and at the same time, you also see, for example, that that actually, when you look, for example, at freight transport, that still I think 3/4 of road freight, of land freight is on road. So that means that you can put some goods on rail, but actually you see that over the past 10 years, there's still a lot on road, and that will also be the future, probably together with rail, but we need to be realistic that still a lot will be on road. So we need to tackle the truck CO2 emissions. So what is Europe actually planning to do to really address this problem? I think there are three main initiatives that I would like to discuss a bit today and inform you a bit about. The first one is VECTO. This is a test procedure for trucks, then fuel efficiency standards, and then the big question mark, what will come after diesel, basically. So the first one is VECTO. So actually, until this year, May 2017, there wasn't really a standard test procedure to measure CO2 emissions of trucks and also the fuel consumption of a truck. And that has now changed. So the European Union, so the member states, they adopted the test procedure. That was in May 2017. That actually basically means that from 2019 onwards, every truck manufacturer, when they want to bring a new truck on the market, they need to test it with VECTO. And then VECTO gives a fuel consumption value and a CO2 value for every truck. But VECTO is a calculation tool. So when I discuss this with Søren, I mean, we are both very much involved, for example, into the whole discussion. But sometimes when I talk with people within the sector, they say, yeah, VECTO, I mean, why do I need to care, basically? I mean, if I want to know the fuel consumption of a truck, I get it for 3 days from a dealer. I drive around with my truck for 3 days, and I know the exact fuel consumption. So why do I need to know? I mean, why is VECTO of any interest for me? Well, I think it's important that also for the transport sector that they are all involved in this discussion, because when VECTO will be there, member states and national authorities can use it, for example, in their taxation policies. Basically saying, the better your truck is in VECTO, so the less fuel it consumes, the more you get a tax break, or they're going to maybe use it in road charging. So that's why it is important for the transport sector that the VECTO value, which is a result of a simulation tool, is close to the on-road performance of a truck. Well, and how can we make sure or guarantee that this is the case? Well, we can guarantee this by introducing an on-road test in VECTO, where a manufacturer actually will be obliged to perform an on-road test. And then also independent parties should basically also have access to these tests. Now, wait a second. Actually, sorry, but I gave another presentation this morning, maybe, because this is the oldest one. Maybe if you can switch to that one, is that possible? I think so, no? I mean, that's just some small change, but I think you put it on the desktop. No worries. No problem. Perfect. Yeah, perfect. Okay. I just included some more slides actually last minute. So this is about VECTO. So as I said before, so we need an on-road test that manufacturers need to do, basically on a vehicle that they just get out of production, but also on a vehicle in service, as we call it, that has been already on the road for a few years. And then also third parties should be allowed to do this testing. So at the moment, this is being discussed in Brussels in this very non-transparent editing boards, we call it. So our whole day events with manufacturers and the commission, and then we try to also influence the process. But in a nutshell, at the moment, manufacturers are claiming that they don't need to do an on-road test and that they're not responsible for this on-road test. So it is important that we push for an on-road test to make sure that the simulation result is in line with the on-road result, because otherwise we'll be in trouble. And then what is the credibility of the whole vector value? Because it needs to be reliable. So the second topic are fuel efficiency standards. Because of the whole context that I described before, Europe is planning to introduce CO2 standards or fuel efficiency standards for trucks in the second quarter of 2018, so actually in the first half of next year. And we do see that this is something that is good for the transport sector and also for the climate. I'll try to explain a little bit in detail why. Well, professionally, not personally, I am subscribed to a German trucking magazine that I get every month, and I read, you know, like every few months I read about truck manufacturers bring a new truck on the market that is extremely efficient, and they reduce fuel consumption with 16% or a DAF with another 12%, etc., and do an on-road test. I mean, these results show that there is a lot of potential to make trucks more fuel efficient. So for example, you have the Mercedes Krone test that actually shows that's from 2016, you can reduce CO2 emissions with 20%. Volvo is testing a concept with minus 30%. And even research shows that you can make trucks more fuel efficient, even 40% by 2030 in a cost-effective way. So that means that the technologies, they pay back within 2 to 3 years because you save fuel. But these are a lot of concepts, right? So these are a lot of examples and showroom trucks. So these are basically the best-in-class trucks, but are they really representative for what you see on the road and what people are buying when they go to a dealer? Well, actually, when you look at the reality, and I start with the left slide, this slide is not a slide by TNE. This is a slide by the European manufacturers. It's in German, but it actually shows the average fuel consumption of trucks in Europe from the manufacturers, so the ones that they are building. So it's not about the ones the transport operators are operating, but the ones they're building. And the red dots actually show the fuel consumption of the average trucks. So I'm not talking about this best-in-class trucks, I'm talking about representative average trucks. And basically, when you see from 1990 to 2010, you kind of actually see that the fuel efficiency of these trucks has actually stagnated, of the average trucks in Europe. At the same time, also manufacturers, they have also been fined recently for the biggest fine in EU history because working together in a cartel for 14 years, basically meaning delaying innovation and raising prices for cleaner trucks, basically. So it kind of shows that we are having a kind of a market failure where you have this kind of very good trucks with a lot of technologies, but when you look at the reality and when you also look at history, I'm not so much convinced if this is really the case. So this is kind of an overwhelming slide, so I'll try to take you through this one. But this is a research that we did where we looked at fuel efficiency technologies for trucks, about their fuel saving potential, the market adoption, and the time they were on the market. And I'll just pick two examples. So for example, when you look at the blue one at the bottom, so this is actually low rolling resistance tires, which you see there, that has a fuel saving potential of 7%. So that's what you see in the drop there. Then when you look at the right, you see actually that these low rolling resistance tires are only on 1% of the vehicles in 2015. But at the same time, they're already on the market for 8 years. Another example is, for example, turbo compounding. This is kind of a technical, kind of a techie innovation. Basically, it recovers heat in the engine and you save 3% fuel. 3% fuel is a lot, right? So this is this color. But at the same time, you see that this turbo compounding was only on 0.24% of the trucks in 2015. While it has been already on the market for more than 15 years. So it kind of shows that there is a market failure going on in the trucking sector. And we, of course, we start wondering, I mean, how is this possible? I mean, manufacturers always say the trucking sector is a rational sector. Everybody wants to have the best truck. And also for transport operators, they're looking for solutions. I mean, a transport operator, fuel is 1/3 of the operating costs. So you try to purchase the most fuel efficient truck that you can get, basically, or the one that you can afford. And that is actually the issue here. So a transport operator is looking for solutions, but when they want to invest in more fuel efficiency technologies, they most of the time come at high prices or at higher prices. You have to buy kind of an eco package, or you have to you have to buy these extra specs, which actually is a lot of extra money. So what it actually basically means is that a lot of these technologies are only on the best-in-class vehicles of the OEMs, and you can only purchase them at high prices. I mean, just a quick illustration, for example, this Mercedes one that was tested that had, for example, low rolling resistance tires on it. Only 1% of the trucks have them. And it also had predictive cruise control. And you see that's the purple one, only 20% of the trucks have them currently in Europe. So it kind of shows basically the logic behind the reasoning here. Now, how can we overcome this? I mean, we see there's a lot of potential. We see that manufacturers can do it, but you don't see it always on the road. This while at the same time a transport operator wants to buy more fuel efficient trucks. They're looking for a solution. Well, so there is cost-effective potential to reduce truck fuel or to improve truck fuel efficiency. Well, when you introduce a fuel efficiency standard or a CO2 standard basically, you put the obligation with the manufacturer. Because what a fuel efficiency standard will do, it will oblige manufacturers to not only build, but also sell more fuel efficient trucks. So with a CO2 standard, as you have it already for cars, you, for example, need to improve the fuel efficiency of your trucks with 10% by 2025. And this is of the trucks you are selling. This is not about the trucks you're building. So that means that the manufacturers have to offer better trucks at more affordable prices. Because if they don't meet the target, for every truck that is not meeting the target, they need to pay a fine. So they have all interest in meeting this one. So what it means is that a lot of the technologies that I discussed before in this very bizarre slide will become standard on the vehicle at attractive prices for the transport operator. If these standards will not be introduced, or they're not ambitious, member states or the European Union, they need to look at other solutions, maybe that are putting more pressure on the transport sector through taxation, road charging, bans, etc. But it is definitely sure that Europe and national authorities, they will take steps. This slide I just introduced, I just input this slide here because it also shows that truck fuel efficiency standards is not something new. It's not something extremely complex that cannot be done. Basically, already China, Japan, Canada, and the United States all have fuel efficiency standards for trucks. Only Europe doesn't have them so far. And you also see here, for example, the American Trucking Association, so basically the road transport sector in the US, they, for example, also welcomed the fuel efficiency standards in the US, and these were actually already the second phase standard, which is a 2027 standard. So basically shows that the concept, that it's not even a concept, that it is a policy measure and that it works and that it's good for the transport and also for the climate sector, when done properly. A last thing I wanted to discuss is what will come after diesel. If we want to reach our 2050 targets in Europe and also in Sweden, we need to go to zero in transport. And that is quite challenging. For cars, this is already, the pathway is more clear than for trucks. I think when we start talking about trucks, we start scratching our heads how on earth we are going to achieve this. And as Søren said, we do care about biofuels ourselves, but maybe we don't always have the same view. But we have a team, so I'm not the biofuel specialist, but we have a team working on energy and biofuels. And first generation biofuels, we don't see it as a solution because they are not more sustainable than diesel. This is a research we did where we actually had a closer look at the diesel emissions of the emissions of diesel and first generation biofuels when you look at the whole circle. So because you need to plant your biofuel somewhere, so that means you need to cut wood somewhere else, or you're importing biofuels, for example, when it's palm oil from other parts in the world. So basically actually showing that the first generation biofuels, especially biodiesel, which is still the main part of biofuels in Europe and also in Sweden, is not a way to decarbonize transport. Well, what about advanced biofuels? Advanced biofuels can definitely be a part of the solution, and especially in member states such as, for example, Sweden or Finland, you know, where you maybe have more, you have more forestry. But at the same time, we also need to be realistic about the scalability. How much advanced biofuels do we have? What is the price of advanced biofuels? And you also need to respect sustainability criteria that you're not, I mean, that you leave also enough waste on the landfills. So this is a bit our view on the biofuels issue. I expect some questions on that maybe. So what do we need to really go for zero by 2050? Well, electrification is probably the most effective way to achieve these targets, also in the trucking sector. Transport operators, first of all, logistic operators, they need zero emission solutions because cities are sometimes already moving faster than national authorities. You hear from bans in Paris, London, low emission zones, Athens, etc. And this will, I believe, will only increase. But at the same time, you also see that traditional manufacturers like to stick to the internal combustion engine or to the gas engine because this is basically their business case. Of course, it's important where the electricity is coming from. I mean, it wouldn't make any sense if we say on biofuels we look at the whole circle, but in electricity we don't. But I mean, for example, the situation in Sweden, it looks pretty positive, I would say, where 69% of the electricity consumption will be renewables by 2030. Then we talk about range. That is, of course, a big question. I think for urban environments, it is definitely possible to already do it in the next few years, to go to electricity. But actually also the new Tesla truck has a range of 800 kilometers. Of course, we need to see how it performs in daily reality. But it shows that it is possible. At the same time, you also see these very exciting projects, such as the Scania Siemens e-highway project in Sweden. It definitely shows that you can electrify also your long-haul transport. Then another interesting fact is actually that also electric trucks will become cost-effective and sooner than we expect. There are different reasons for that. First of all, the battery prices are halving between 2010 and 2020. But then secondly, actually an electric truck is way more efficient than a diesel truck, an internal combustion engine. I mean, you have zero or close to zero maintenance on an electric engine because there's no combustion engine process. The engine efficiency is 85% compared to 35% of a diesel truck. So that means when you, for example, are idling or when you are in traffic or in urban environments, you don't lose any energy. And then also Europe is also proposing that electric or zero emission trucks would get a 75% discount on the road charging. So that basically means that the more you will be driving your electric truck, the cheaper it will get basically. Just a quick thought on this. I mean, when you look at electricity, you also need to look at efficiency. And we looked at different electric solutions, basically. And you see that direct charging, so for example, with a battery truck where you plug it in and you charge it directly, or with a catenary truck and you take electricity from the power lines above the road, is the most efficient one. When you look at other solutions such as hydrogen, or for example, these new e-fuels that they're now talking about, electric fuels, which is, for example, power to liquid, you have a chemical process with a lot of in-between steps where you have to convert a lot of energy. And actually that's extremely inefficient. And it's already going to be very challenging to put all our transport on renewable electricity. So you need to go for the most efficient solution. So just to conclude, so what is the way forward, or how do we see the way forward? Vecto is definitely a good first step. It will increase transparency, but it will not help us to remove the market barriers that good trucks are more expensive and that you can only purchase them at very or higher prices. Fuel efficiency standards are the most important next step, I would say. There's a lot of potential to improve fuel efficiency in a cost-effective manner. It will oblige manufacturers to really build and also sell more fuel-efficient trucks. And then electrification is a long-term solution, and also here Europe can help with a zero-emission vehicle mandate, where you basically oblige a manufacturer to not only build but also sell zero-emission vehicles. So, and I mean, what I hoped I managed to explain is that truck CO2 emissions are high on the political agenda in Brussels, as also Søren said. But I think it's very important to realize that this is, I mean, this is a challenge, but definitely also a big opportunity for the transport sector and also for climate, obviously. So thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions.